All right, welcome. It is time for another story chat, my friends. I'm Sergio. How are you? I'm with Storyboard Art, where we're training the next generation of storytellers. And we train people how to get better at visual storytelling, doing your storyboards, making sure you guys are doing something awesome. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about perspective tips. Now, this is one of the things that comes up all the time, okay? And I want to get just to the basics of it and hopefully have a little more time this time around to answer your questions. I'm on the go here, which is kind of cool in my mobile studio. I'm going to be using a Surface Pro. This is a little tablet that I have. I think it's a really cool machine. If you have a mobile setup like this, you could even use this on the go on a job, on freelancing or something like that. And it's pen enabled and it's pretty slick. It uses Windows. So I'll be doing a little demo on that. So let me talk a little bit about what is important when it comes to perspective, because what we do as storyboard artists is we are a camera. We are essentially transforming what we see in our mind and creating a shot that will be represented with a camera. Now, whether you're doing this in 3D or you're actually using visual effects, we're always referencing a camera. And of course, in live action, you're going to be using a real physical camera. And what we need to be doing is analyzing whether the perspective that we're using is either creating depth and is accurate to the kind of shots that we're using, and what we do to represent the lenses. So now you can get really deep with this subject, but I really want to talk about the basics. At the very core of it all, you really have three options for your camera setup. Either you're looking straight on at somebody, right? Your camera is eye level with the subject, right? Let's imagine you have an actor and a person that you're trying to shoot for a particular shot, and you just place the camera straight on. Now that's going to give you one set of perspective and compositional compositional framing that you need. The other one is that you can either have the camera higher, so you're looking down on that subject, okay? And so you position that camera up high and you're looking down on that person, and of course the opposite of that is the camera's a little bit lower and you're looking up at that person, right? Or up at the subject in this particular case. So with that, what we want to do is identify which one of those choices we're going to make. And it could be either extremely up, an upshot looking down at something, or you could put the camera on the floor and it's very extreme. And then you could also throw the camera lens very wide, so you get a big broad spectrum of what you see in front of the lens. Or you could do something very narrow, right? And you just have a small framing of it. But you're still going to have those choices whether you're straight on, up above, or down below, okay? So those are really the three basic choices you have there. And what you're going to be doing for that is representing the eye level of the camera with a horizon line, and this is where we get into this perspective stuff. So let me just pull my screen up, and I do these demos. If you've seen this, seen me do a couple of demos before. I like to use Sketchbook because it's a really easy program. This is it basically just has a nice canvas, and you have your layer tools, and then a couple brushes. It's very simple, but there are a couple powerful tools, and when it comes to perspective, I'm going to show you one that's actually really, really awesome. So the first thing you want to do when you're creating compositions here is actually just start off with a frame, okay? And it can be as simple as that, and it's kind of this rectangle that we're going to be doing. And it could be more square or more long and rectangular horizontal, but let's just say you got something average like that. Then on another layer, I'm going to go ahead and draw what my actual internal stuff that I'm going to be doing inside that composition, okay? And this is where the first thing I'm going to do is lay down a horizon line. Now, it's just like that. It's just a line, okay? And I can move this line using these tools. It's really easy to actually do. You can move it up in the composition, higher in the frame, or lower in the frame. You can even take it outside of the frame, okay? I'll probably just put it, let's just assume it's right in the middle right now, okay? Now, the most basic thing that I'm going to do when it comes to perspective, and this might seem really, really fundamental, really like the start of it all, but it's the basics that most people get wrong. So I'm going to tell you what you want to be doing here is you got a vanishing point on that horizon line. So horizon line represents the level, your eye level, and the height of the camera, okay? Remember that. The height of the camera, your eye level, what you're looking at, okay? On that horizon line, you're going to plant a vanishing point. You simply put a point, okay? It doesn't matter where. on that horizon line for now, okay? And then from that point, you're gonna radiate lines. And you got, this is your vanishing point, and this is what's gonna be creating a perspective grid. And I'm just radiating lines. I'm not even worried about the ruler or making them very straight. You know, it's just very freehand right now. And I'm directing diagonal lines to that point as they recede into the background, and then I'm gonna put horizontal lines as if it's like, you know, a grid on the floor or sort of tiles on the floor or something like that. Now this is the basics of what you need to be doing. And again, you can go back into your digital tools here and raise that grid up either higher or lower. So you can, for example, if up here, then I can draw something that is much lower. And in fact, let me just drop the opacity here, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. At the very least, you know, you could draw like, I don't know, if we're looking down at a barrel, you know, something like this, and you might have somebody, you know, I don't know, leaning on something here. So we're looking more down on him, on this person, and that's the kind of perspective view that we're getting, right? We're seeing the tops of his shoulders, we're seeing the tops of his feet, and it's somewhat planted on this grid, okay? We're using that as a reference point. You see what I'm saying? Now, what if I lower this? I'm gonna go back to the grid here. What if I lower that grid and change this around? Now you're changing the perspective. Okay, now you're looking straight on, and it's starting to look a little bit wonky of what I drew before, okay? Now you got a whole different set of things that you can be doing. Let me put up another layer, and I'll go ahead and draw something, you know, that same kind of scene. It was the guy leaning on some kind of cylinder, right? But now we're looking more straight on. So now the line of shoulders is going to go to this perspective vanishing point here, okay? So what we had before is now changed a little bit, and like here's his waist. If I drew an ellipse at the waist, and I'm going to draw off the page here, it's okay. And then you're still going to see the top of the feet, okay? And you know, we can adjust this and clean it up as much as we want. But this is the basics of what we're going to be seeing. So the waist, if you imagine you can see through this character, you're going to be looking at the top of the waist, at the top of the hips, but you're actually going to be below the line of the shoulders. Okay, you see how the line of the shoulders is going to this perspective here. Okay, and then this line here, if I drew that to the vanishing point, in fact, let me do it a little bit more accurately. It's going to go about here all the way to that vanishing point. You see what I'm saying? So now we're looking at that at a different perspective. All right. Now you can go as extreme as you want. Let me just turn this off. And back to my perspective grid, I'm going to move this around one more time, and I'll bring this down really low. So imagine that the camera is like on the floor, all right? And now I'm going to maybe do a closer up shot, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. You know, I don't have to necessarily rule this out, but let's assume it's the same guy, and he's leaning up on, you know, a cylinder. But now I'm seeing a much more upshot, okay? Like you probably see the underside of the nose, you see the underside of the chin, and I'm just roughing this in, like just sketching, right? Like I'm not even worried about details, but I want to get that general upshot look, okay? And we'll fix the proportions, we'll fix all that later. But I want to really understand that I'm getting an upshot. I'm looking up at his head, okay? Does that make sense? That we got three options. You got the eye level, you got, you know, looking down on somebody, and now you got looking up. Now there's infinite number of variations when you're going to do this kind of perspective stuff of this, like of the three choices, the three basic choices that you have, okay? Upshot, downshot, or eye level. But you just want to get that feeling of it. And I'm not even being that accurate with the perspective. Like I could rule this out, but I'm just doing a quick sketch and just going over this, and that's it, okay? So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense when it comes to actually drawing out these you know, different variations of what you're going to be doing with your composition. Okay, now let me talk a little bit more about composition, and I have a few more pointers that I want to get off, and then we can get into some of your questions. The biggest thing that happens that I think with artists, especially the younger artists that are And let me turn off my perspective grid here and we'll start fresh. The biggest thing that happens is that they're not showing in their portfolios that they have a solid grasp of perspective, okay? That's one of the things I call out all the time when I'm looking at portfolios. They might have good storytelling, interesting ideas, maybe some cool gags, but I know as a story artist, you're gonna be challenged to make an accurate representation of your shot. And if you can't draw the perspective of a car and trees and buildings and people, you're at a disadvantage. And I need to see that as a story artist that I'm, maybe a supervisor, I'm bringing on guys to help out on a team. I need to see that in your portfolio. So that's one of the key things that you show. Now you don't have to necessarily call it out and do this crazy architectural perspective drawing in your storyboard portfolio. What you want to do with the shots that you create in your portfolio and the samples that you show is to have really good examples of perspective. So you're not necessarily doing an isolated perspective example, but by the nature of the shots that you're choosing in the sequences that you show, you are showing that you can draw a car or building or any kind of complicated thing with perspective. Okay, so one of the most important things to draw are people, and I can eyeball kind of just based on things that I've drawn before. But let's say I'm doing like a semi over-the-shoulder down shot of a character, okay? And he's somewhat in the foreground. So let's do that here. And then I've already kind of established the perspective. I don't really necessarily have to show a grid, but this is what it would look like if I'm just sketching something in. So that means the next character, if I want to put them in the composition here, I'd still be at a down shot, and then maybe their line of shoulders would be the same thing, in line with whatever we're showing here. So, maybe this guy has like a gesture and he's got his hands up and maybe his arms are bent here, something like that. And then, they're having a conversation and they're kind of looking at each other this way, right? So you see that I'm constructing this with an understanding that the shot is looking down at the person. I already have that in my brain, okay? I don't necessarily have to rule out the perspective each time. So that's how you do it. Now this would be the rough, of course, and then you go on in another layer and you go ahead and you clean this up. Now if it's not 100% accurate, this is one of the things that we have a little more leeway when it comes to storyboards compared to if you're doing concept design or just an architectural drawing or a very rendered thing. What you want to do is get the feeling of perspective, and that what you have in the shot is giving the illusion of depth and the illusion of the representation of what you want in that frame. But you don't necessarily have to rule out every little detail when it comes to the perspective of it, okay? So, well, let me just invent something here, along the lines, it could be something a little more complicated, like what if somebody is like, has a car that comes in here, and car shapes are pretty complicated because there's so many angles when it comes to the vehicle. So what you want to do is kind of just simplify that a little bit. Let's assume that's like the front edge of the car, and you have somebody there in the driver's seat, okay? And this is the side view mirror. And then whatever, let's assume now, what I'm doing here is trying to isolate what the focal point will be. And you can see that I've already identified a lot of these vanishing points that are going somewhat here in the middle. So why don't I put something here that's going to be like the focal point? This could be like a big semi-truck or something that's coming up here. So I'm just going to sketch this in really quickly. You might throw a couple details. This could be like at a stoplight, and there could be a crosswalk or something here to give it a little more depth. But basically everything is kind of pointing. You see that? Like if I actually drew an arrow, that it's kind of pointing at the focal point that I want here, and then everything else that I put in here is going to support it. So like I could add a couple of trees or whatever it is that I want in the background, but I'll just like scribble it in there. This is where at least you're getting your ideas out and understanding what it is you want in the composition. And does that look 100% right? I don't know. You know, here's where I could like play around with things, and this is where the digital tools come into play, where I could do things like this and just, why don't I tilt the camera lens? Okay, so this is where the idea of the camera comes in, and what I did, I just tilted that horizon line. So remember how I drew that horizon line like horizontal at the beginning? And then now here, what I'm doing is just tilting it. So now it looks like I got a Dutch tilt on this frame, okay? So that's something that you can easily do with digital tools. In fact, I think I screwed it up a bit. Let me just readjust it here, and you kind of get the idea, right? So you have to have the concept in your brain that what it is that you want to represent as a camera shot, and then the tools that you're going to be using are the perspective tools that you get. Okay, now really quickly, one more thing before we go into and start, you know, answering your questions and stuff, is I want to show you a really cool tool inside of this program. And there are variations of this in other programs like Photoshop and even Toon Boom when you're doing your storyboards. But let me get rid of, well, actually, I'll turn these layers off, and I'll turn off the frame, in fact, and I'll just do another layer on top. So right up here, you'll notice this button. It is, it's a perspective tool that comes with this sketchbook program, and you'll notice it's got a horizon line. Think of it as that. Think of it as like a ruler is basically what it is, like an old school ruler. It's got this dot in here which represents your vanishing point, and look what happens. It automatically, as I start throwing down strokes, it locks it to that vanishing point. So you still have to understand the theory of perspective, that it's all going to a vanishing point. This is visual perspective that's all set out, and I can even like throw in my horizon line. It's all ruled out, very clean, and it doesn't have that freehand look, right? And I can turn this off and on. So, you know, if I want to actually go freehand again, I can just, you know, go in there and just, it helps you as a basis in sketching it out. Let me show you a little bit more of what you can do here. I'll go ahead and erase that. This is 2-point perspective. So now you got 2 points, okay? 2 vanishing points. And look how cool this is. You can tilt your camera lens just like that, okay? And I'll put it horizontal here. Just let's not complicate things just yet. So look, it's now projecting to 2 vanishing points, and look what's gonna happen. It's gonna create a grid that, you know, sometimes it's not as accurate. You gotta be very deliberate about how you're doing your strokes sometimes with this particular tool, but that's okay. You're gonna do this on a layer that is basically your rough, okay? And then look at this, what I'm already creating. I'm creating like this grid that is automatically going to the vanishing point. So, and then, you know, you can do verticals here too. You can go above the horizon line. You don't always have to draw below. I just have that natural habit that I do that. So that's one way to do it. Let me show you another cool thing. This is the 3-point perspective tool that's in there. Let me bring this down a little bit so we can get this in the frame. So it's going to look really distorted and really tight here, because that's in 3-point perspective. You want to have a bigger canvas in the way that you're drawing. Okay, so here we go. This is now projecting. Whoops. You want to make sure that you can lock this in there, by the way, so that the actual vanishing points don't move and it doesn't screw up your drawing if you're doing something else. So you see how it's now snapping to those 3 vanishing points on there. Now the coolest one that I really like is the 5-point perspective. This is where you get like your fisheye lens. Let me unlock it, and I'll move this around a bit. I'll make this really small. This is how you create a fisheye lens, right? So let me lock this in again, and I'll show you how that is. So what happens here is now the horizontal lines are going to be warping. You see that? In fact, it's probably a little bit too small. Let me widen this out a bit, and we'll start again. So it's now warping to each one of the vanishing points, and this is what creates that fisheye, you know. And this is how you create the very wide angle lenses that you're going to be using to represent a camera. And this is just fun things to play around. It's going to look like a globe in a lot of ways, okay? So that's one of the ways that we do that with this. So but what this is, it's a tool, just like anything else. And you don't have to use it. Like I don't have to use this perspective thing. I can just eyeball it, okay? And that's really what you want, is to have the ability to know whether you're doing an upshot or a downshot, and how that's going to be represented with this. And you just go ahead and eyeball it. Like, let me start this again, is if I have a frame and I want to show a character's like expression, just like how much of the shoulders am I going to see, right? Ask yourself that. Am I going to see the underside of the nose, right? Do you actually see the nostrils from below or not? Like maybe this guy's looking up in the corner, right? And then what is he, are you seeing the top of the teeth or the bottom of the teeth, right? That kind of stuff. Those are all questions that you ask yourself as you're doing it. And then, right here I'm seeing the bottom of the chin and, some of the underside of the hair, right? And it's just a quick sketch in here. You don't have to be precious with it. Then you go in and you clean it up, all right? So that's all some very simple and basic tips when it comes to perspective and composition that I hope you guys are doing in your storyboards. The most important thing that I think is really important to highlight is that you want to be showing this to clients and potential employers as what you're doing and what you're showing in the examples that you have. So they don't have that doubt. Now they don't say, well, can this guy make a really dynamic angle? I'm doing this really quick in sketches, but if I have something complicated, I might spend a good hour on one storyboard panel, maybe 2 hours. The time limit doesn't matter. But that's a decent amount of time to be spending on this to create a really nice shot, okay? Cool, all right, so let me go into some of this. There's been a lot of questions here. I want to get to as many as we can. We're gonna be going to 6:30 here, and we'll see how many we can get to. Thank you guys for joining up, by the way. It's so awesome that you can participate. Let me pull this up on screen. Here's one that's really great from Anna. So Anna's asking, thanks for this, Sergio. Are there any drills or exercises you recommend to help get a better grasp of perspective? I have a couple that I recommend often, which is one, drawing from films. So you hear me give that recommendation a lot, okay? So drawing from movies and like freeze framing the movies. Now what that does is basically, if you're freeze framing something, you're essentially drawing from a photograph, if you think about it, because it's a still frame. And it's one, hopefully nicely composed frame that you can pause in a movie. It does a couple of things too, is that movies are going to be using the lenses that you want. With still photography, sometimes there could be some Photoshop there. You don't exactly know what's going on. Well, I guess visual effects could also affect things in a film. But it helps to understand the shot that they're going for in a film. So I do recommend film references and actually understanding the perspective. So going in and drawing, tracing it, right? Tracing it, you're not going to put a piece of paper up on the screen, right? If you're, pausing your Netflix, for example, but you can have your sketchbook in hand or your tablet like this, like I'm showing you here, right? And you go ahead and you eyeball it, right? You're looking at the screen and you're seeing if you can copy it. Do that, can you do that for an hour a week? And just sit down with your favorite films. And, I kind of like to do that by myself because watching that, somebody watching a movie with me and I freeze frame it all the time, they're going to get really annoyed. So anyway, that's one of the things that I recommend for practicing your perspective is drawing from photography. The next thing that I'll recommend, I'll say this really quickly too, that you guys have heard me, is draw from life. Okay, and right now I'm on location traveling a bit, and one of the cool things I get to see is really interesting and unique architecture that I'm not usually seeing where I live. So that gives me some challenges that I have, and I really like to go ahead and sketch those out, even if it's a quick sketch there. Great question. Oh, this is a backup, similar question here from Emmanuel. So it's kind of a follow-up. How do you personally practice or used to practice your perspective when starting out? You know what I did? I recommend this book a lot. I had a lot of trouble with perspective. And I got, real rude awakening when I had to start drawing in a professional way at an animation studio. And I really had to understand what the vanishing points were. So I learned my architectural perspective. Okay, I really did. And I recommend you guys do too. That is it's a challenge. You really want to be in the mood to do that because it's a technical exercise, okay? But I think it's so, so valuable. Once you learn it, you continue practicing it, but the basics are there. Like when I'm talking about horizon line and vanishing points and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 perspective, or 1, 2, 3, and 5 perspective, you at least understand what I'm talking about. And so one of the things I did was Loomis. I'm a real fan of Andrew Loomis and his books. So I recommend that because I think what I learned from Andrew Loomis in the books that he had, like Figure Drawing for All It's Worth is one. These books are back in print, by the way, is that you could draw human characters in perspective and understanding that and the relationship with each other, okay? That was one thing that I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, there are many good books on perspective, but I would get one that rings to you, that you kind of understand and that you can sit down with and practice on a regular basis, or over the course of a month or two, and just get through it. You really have to do that and power through it. You will be so better off for it, okay? Trust me, it's not time wasted. It really is not, okay? So this is a technical question here. What version of Sketchbook are you using? Hey Joseph, this is an older version actually. I think it's from 2020 or 21. And this is when they actually had a free version. I think now you have to pay. It was made from Autodesk. There's been some shuffle around with that particular program. I think it's still a really good deal. I think comparable to like a Procreate. And once you buy the license, I think you get it forever. So that's really cool. We got another one from Emmanuel Mejia. How do you analyze film? Great question. What is it you look for? What do you think when doing it? Now I'm gonna spin this question in terms of the topic that we're talking about today. How do I analyze films in terms of perspective and learning about shots and composition? The films that I like the most are dramatic films to learn this thing, because I think dramatic films have a lot of deep space. They're using camera angles that will represent a lot of motion and action, and that they're being very creative with the action scenes, for example. And dramatic scenes like let's say a horror film, you might have like long corridors or things like that create that tension, and those are things that you'd want to analyze and understand what's working in that particular moment. And here's what I often do is the feeling that I get while I'm watching these films. Let's say it's a horror film that I just mentioned. Do I feel scared? Do I feel tense, right? Is the music and the visuals and everything making me tense right now? Ask yourself why. And what in the visuals in particular is making you feel that way? And can you represent that in your storyboards? Can you represent that in a drawing? That's where you pause right there on the frame that you feel like is representative of that, and you do a sketch. Okay, that's when you're going to do that. All right. All right, here we go. Let me get a couple of these in. Hey, this is a great question from JSEO 0348. Hey, buddy. How do you understand screenwriting from animation? This is a slightly different from what we're talking about today, but one of the things I will push and kind of give a plug is we just wrote a couple pillar article pieces that we published on our website, and I do recommend you guys go to our website and check out some of those things that are there, resources for you. And we're going to be talking about in some upcoming articles too about 3-act structure and how to break that down. But screenwriting in general, I don't break it down whether it's animation or live action or any other kind of medium. It's film. It is sequential art and filmmaking, and that's where I think you want to understand the story structure and how to break things down. And there's a very cool way to do that, and so that's where again a good book would help. I certainly will give a shameless plug to the people that work with us in our organization in Storyboard Art and the mentorship. Like, we talk a lot about story structure and what to do there and how to analyze that stuff, because we need to know that as visual artists, how to order the images that we're doing so it makes sense. And that's where you get into story structure and the screenwriting of it. We're essentially writing with drawings. That's what we do. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Hey, Tracy, thanks. You like that? I'll repeat this a little bit. So she's saying that how does a film make you feel? The emotional underpinning of everything we do as artists is really at the heart of the reason why we're doing these storyboard panels and these storyboard drawings. If you just randomly do an exercise for perspective and you're trying to make it as technically cool as possible, but there's no feeling there's no reason why you're doing it, and it doesn't make any sense in the story that you're just trying to do something cool, to me that doesn't have very much weight. But can you make me feel something? All right, this is where you really want to tug on the emotions of your audience, and we talk a lot about that as well, that the design of your sequence should lead your audience on an emotional journey. And this is what it's all about. So right now in this discussion, we're talking about technical things with perspective because people struggle a lot with it. I see that in so many portfolios that they don't have a solid grasp of representing the camera angles. But once you do, and it's very, it's not impossible to get these skills, okay? It really isn't. You got to practice. You got to, use some of the suggestions that we're talking about. There's a lot of good conversation going on in our chat right now too. So that take those suggestions and practice them, because once you get a grasp on how to represent that shot and how to make a really cool camera angle, that's when you actually start making your audience feel something. And when they feel something, you got it. And that's where you get the storytelling bug and there's no going back. This is really the most thrilling thing you can ever do is create a story and tell it and be able to have that response from others. And I think that's really what this is all about. So perspective is not an exercise in and of itself. There's a reason to it. And this all comes so that you have those fundamental skills, but then later on, boom, you're going to be able to really create that emotional effect. And the height of your camera makes a difference. If you have a camera pointing down on somebody and you're looking down on your subject, you're essentially making your subject inferior. And the same thing goes if you push the camera down, you're looking up at something, you're making that subject look more emotionally superior to your audience. And it really does come across, okay? Look at these really cool Marvel movies with superheroes and stuff. How do you make a superhero look cool? A lot of the times the camera is really low and it's going to make these things larger than life, okay, right? So those are things that you want to do. All right, just a couple more questions and that'll do it for us today. Let me bring this up. Oh, this is great. I love this. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, Becca comment, that's why so many movies today are so forgettable. They focus too much on the cool factor and not connecting emotionally to the audience. I could tell you that over and over again is so true, so true. All right. This one from Madam Lai. Do clients tend to leave the compositions up to you? Do you usually get enough direction from them? It really depends on your client and what you're doing there. So in a lot of the narrative storytelling that I do, it is like really up to you. You are a mini director of your sequence, and that's where the responsibility will fall on your shoulders to create those compositions. That's why they hire you. You are essentially the lens. You are you're a set of eyeballs that are going to create these compositions. Now you'll get other jobs where they have a lot of much more direction that they want, and they already have the ideas in your head, and that's where you want to execute the idea in a cool way, right? That's basically what it is. All right, guys, I hope this helped, and there's a lot more coming. I want to also put again a plug to the fact that if you want more of this stuff, come to our website storyboardart.org and check out the forums that we have there. So go to storyboardart/forums. And there you can sign up to our Discord channel, and there's a lot of really great conversation going on there too. And we're going to have more of these chats as we get closer to warming up to some of the cool launches that we're doing in the future. We're going to have a couple of cool drawing-related courses and a lot of activity going on online. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and keep those questions coming. I love to see a lot of what you guys are doing in the background. Thanks. All right, we'll talk soon. See ya.